In our gospel reading, Jesus said, "Make purses for yourselves that don't wear out." Jesus talks a lot about money and possessions. I find it interesting because Jesus lived and ministered in a time where most people didn't have much money or possessions. Today, despite the daily rise and fall of stock prices, the daily rise and fall of dramatic news headlines, we live in a very stable society. Life expectancy is relatively high, crime rate is very low, but we are still anxious. We're still afraid, as many studies show, more anxious than those who lived generations ago. They did a study of the amount of free time people had, I think the 1950s, maybe 60s, compared with today, and found that today we have hours, plural, hours more free time per day than people in the 1950s. And obviously because of technology, things like computers, washing machines, smartphones, technology that saves us so much time. Yet, we feel like we have less time. We feel crunched, anxious. I think no matter the era, as Jesus knew, we can fear, worry about losing what we have, anxious about what we don't have. In the letter to Hebrews, the people were afraid. They were afraid of what they thought was important to them. They wondered if Christianity was worth the fear and anxiety. They are afraid of persecution. Being new Christians as Jews, they were being ostracized by their fellow Jewish friends. They were being ostracized for not keeping kosher. They were being ostracized for following Jesus. They're afraid maybe this isn't what they thought. What good is this new religion if it just brings trouble, if it brings, all this anxiety? Well, Christianity, one way to say it is it's not a religion. It's a faith in a different way of living. Faith, as Hebrews says, in the unseen things. A faith that lasts, that doesn't perish. A kingdom lived by faith, not by rituals or material offerings to a needy God. Faith in something more steady and secure. It's also not placing our faith, our hope, in our possessions or our lack of possessions. So our Hebrews reading has this incredible definition of faith, an alternative plan to placing our hope in things. The finest definition of faith in the Bible. He says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. He goes on and says, for by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. He says, remember, we believe in a God who created the world out of things that we can't even see. In Latin, they call this ex nihilo, that God created things out of nothing. In our creed, right, created things visible and invisible. We believe in that. He says that's what our faith is. The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews is trying to encourage their readers, not admonish them, but encourage them, because they're wavering. They're wondering if it's really worth it. They're concerned that the seen things of life are the most important. Their friend group, their social group, maybe their family, the cultural pressures of leaving Judaism. Those are high bars that they're not sure if it's worth it. But like all social pressures, it's a facade. So Hebrews uses a word to describe faith. Is translated sometimes assurance of things hoped for, or the real essence of things hoped for, or the confidence of things hoped for. Some translations say faith is the substance of things hoped for. Others say faith gives substance to our hope. Faith gives substance to our hope. Finding security in the unseen but permanent things of forgiveness, mercy, and love. For our real estate agents out there, one translation describes it, old translation says that faith is the title deed of things hoped for. The title deed of things hoped for. To trust in a God we don't see, I don't think it's any crazier than trusting in the promises of somebody you love. The hope you place that they really will love you, that they will follow through on that promise. The unseen bonds we place in our own security. Granted, promises that we require constant reminders and reaffirmations of, that we question, wait, do you still love me because of what you did? So maybe placing our faith in God is a little less crazy than we might think. The author of Hebrews wants the Jews to remember the people of old who also had faith in the unseen things. He says, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel. Remember these people. They persevered through faith through very difficult circumstances. They believed in what had not yet occurred. That God would produce, these heirs of thousands, millions, trillions. The unseen things, their unseen descendants. Hebrews said they died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them, they greeted them from afar. He says, having acknowledged they were strangers and exiles on earth. That while on earth they would never have complete assurance, they would never see these things that they had faith in. They were people who trusted in a future promise, and they acted as if that state of affairs was already present. They lived their lives as if the Messiah had come, as if the descendants were there. No, I don't think this is blind faith, not faith in a cult, but open eyes, trusting in a God that doesn't take advantage of you, like some cult leader. Because faith is only as strong as the object you put your faith in. I remember as a teenager, I put a lot of faith in my older brother. And when he disappointed me, when he didn't meet my high standards, when he let me down, that really shattered me. The fall was very hard. Because the object of my faith, my brother, wasn't strong enough to hold. Nobody is. Maybe you've put too much faith in an unstable location. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a possession, a commodity. They will either let you down or they'll take you over. When people tell me that they are, atheists, that they don't fear or worship a God that they can't see, I always think to myself, I don't know you that well, but I know you're worshiping something. You may not worship God, but you might be worshiping money. Maybe it's status, a lover, an intellectual movement, a politician, or maybe yourself. You're worshiping something. John Calvin said that the human heart is an idol factory. Always making something, finding something else to worship instead of God. And so we're called to place again our trust and our faith in Jesus and the unseen promises. This is not wishful thinking, not blind faith, as I said. We have the scriptures. We have something real and beautiful to point towards. Our blessed assurance is in the hope of Jesus of Nazareth, and we know him, and he is good. He is the one who cared for the uncared for. In Luke 12, Jesus says, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to the needy, Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Jesus opens with, "Fear not." He's been talking right before this about possessions, about worry, anxiety, uncertainty of life, which is true. Fear and anxiety over the seen things of money, possessions, security. Jesus doesn't say, well, it's God's will. No, he acknowledges the uncertainty. He acknowledges the evil of humans. He acknowledges our need for our daily bread. He sees our constant worry. But he also reminds us of his care and a different way of living, a different way of life, a kingdom of heaven. Not the, well, I can't beat them, let's join them strategy of doubling down on fear, numbing out with our unhealthy coping mechanisms, but a continual death and resurrection, a new way of looking at ourselves and others. Jesus says he wants to give us the kingdom, to let go of things that control us, to give things away, possessions, items that grow old, wear out, things, to put our faith in things that aren't affected by inflation. Are you able to let go, to put your faith elsewhere? Larry Parsley says that Jesus is deconstructing worry. The command to just stop worrying is as simple as saying, stop blinking. Easier said than done. Even us pastors worry as we type up sermons about not worrying. So peace will not come with your willpower. Just don't worry. But something deeper, a daily renewal of death and resurrection. Temporary release from the dread that grips us. Because possession, anxiety, worry can consume you. It will harm your spouse. It can oppress your children. And you can get help. But Jesus is trying to display the kingdom of heaven in contrast to the kingdom of prosperity that every age lives in. The kingdom of accumulation, a kingdom of perishable dreams. To instead put our faith in something more stable and lasting. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so Jesus finishes by sharing a story with some familiar themes: wedding feast, lamps lit, the master, the servant, and feasting. He says, stay dressed for action. Keep your lamps burning. Be like the men who are waiting for their master to come home from a wedding feast, so that they may open their door to him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants who the master finds awake when he comes. Truly, I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or in the third, finds them awake, blessed are those servants. So the master is off at this wedding feast, often a parable, right, for the end times and God's judgment. He comes back, the servants are ready. They've kept their lamps trimmed, they're ready for the master. But the master then dresses as a servant and serves the servants. What a strange story. It's the world turned upside down, a different way to live. In the Roman world, it was not normal for a person with great possessions to share with anyone outside their circle. Not normal to share with anyone unless they could pay you back. They could scratch your back at a later date, favorable to your family or your business. But Jesus here and elsewhere speaks of giving to people that can't return the favor. So the requirement of Jesus' kingdom values is that we identify with the slave in this story. That's the hero. That's the main character. Jesus focuses on the servant, the one without. That's who the master bends the knee for. The person without is who we care about. The person with no possessions. The person who receives from the master, is fed at the table. Jesus lifting up the lowly, bringing peace. The master, the important person, acting servile, giving away. The servants aren't running around acting busy because the boss is coming back. In serving the slaves, the master fulfills Mary's song, the Lord lifting up the lowly, reworking cultural, religious norms. All the us versus them rhetoric taken away. And so that's the treasure. Receiving from God and giving to others. Jesus is not telling the poor not to worry. He helps and feeds them throughout his ministry. But he is telling us to turn our gaze outward to others. For where our treasure is, there your heart will be also. Our faith, our hope, and purses that don't grow old. Treasure in the heavens that doesn't fail. Where no thief approaches, where no moth destroys, no rust, inflation to keep you up at night. What does it mean to have our lamps lit, to be ready for that master's return, but to be dressed in the righteousness of Christ, to wear his garment to the wedding feast, to trust in him, reorienting our lives to what doesn't fail, to love, to service. Just like at the Last Supper, the leader is the one who is not served but serves, gives his life as a ransom for many. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. May God give us the faith in a Lord whose promises do not age or fade away. Amen.